Welcome to Nightmares and Grief, a place to explore and celebrate the darkness. Each episode, I'll read stories written by me, Derek Heisey. Today's episode is part 3 of my novel, To Make the World Obey. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I strongly recommend you start there. I've left a link in the description. Last time, Temujin's cult raided the Rolling Hills strip club operated by the criminal organization known as the Friends. There, the cult abducted Vicky and 2 others. Detective Deborah Samson's attempt to be put on the Fred Meyer massacre case failed, and she and Freddie followed up on their only lead regarding the mutilated body in the dumpster, which Deborah is certain has a connection to the massacre. They questioned Peaches, a sadistic theatrical pimp who withheld information unless they stopped a human trafficking shipment incoming for his competition. We ended with the bust, and Deborah feeling unsatisfied with her delivery of justice. What plans does Temujin have for Vicky? Will Temujin's cult be stopped before they strike again? And how will the Friends respond to the attack on their turf? Find out on today's episode of To Make the World Obey. This story is not a gentle darkness. It includes graphic depictions of violence, sexual themes, misogyny, kidnapping, abuse, brainwashing, and others. It examines the psychology of power in killers and victims alike, and explores the way various forms of violence, physical and otherwise, transforms both the inflicted and the witness. If you're sensitive to intense graphic content, this series may not be for you. Now, settle in, check under the bed, and pour a drink for the skeletons in your closet. It's time to start. Vicky in the darkness. The water had hold of her mind, built homes in the canyons of her brain, and created a world for itself in the brief time that it was alive. In a show of shadow puppetry, a trick of light and darkness, her emotions manifested before her as physical creatures constructed without shape, built out of unspeakable geometries neither present nor absent. There were ghosts and phantoms with true presence and untrue mass, living without life or death. The basement, if it even was the basement anymore, it seemed to be another place, but she wasn't sure where, and she wasn't even sure what a basement was anymore. The basement had no walls, even though there were still walls. But they were maybe the walls of a stomach. She was in the stomach of a whale. She was Jonah. The gray, porous walls were really the lining of a great stomach, and she was still inside of it. From the old story, Jonah came out of the whale, so she would too. In the darkness, she'd forgotten herself. It was like she'd put her keys somewhere and couldn't find them. She groped around the darkness to find herself. Pat, pat, pat went her palms, exploring the floor. It felt like a cat's tongue. Maybe she was a mouse. Maybe she was a mouse in the belly of a whale. She felt something soft and she stopped searching. Maybe it was her. Hello? What are you? She felt it some more, and it was pretty big. It had shape to it, not like the floor. At one end, there was something wet and sticky, and if she felt further, she felt fuzz. A connection snapped in her head. She reached up and touched her head. It was fuzzy. This must be her. Hello? Can you tell me who you are? The thing on the floor said, I'm Lola. I thought you were me. No, I'm Lola. I don't know who you are. It came to her in a rush of seawater. "Oh, I remember now. I'm Vicky." She figured out where Lola's head was and remembered that she was dead. So she cradled the head close to her breast and hushed it, stroked it, told it that everything would be okay. The sounds in the room blended with the sounds in her mind or faded away completely. Vicky didn't hear the stairs when they creaked. She was so captivated by the head in her hands and the ideas in her mind that when the man's bare feet padded over the concrete of the basement, she didn't notice. In fact, it wasn't until the man loomed above her that she noticed him at all. Behind him, the light burned her eyes and her skin. She shrieked and let go of Lola, which made her sad and guilty. The shadow over the man's face was exaggerated, but Vicky couldn't tell if it was real or not. It reminded her of Darth Vader, all tall and fury coiled into dense, hateful muscle. She thought he breathed like Darth Vader, too. "Who are you? I know you, but I don't." She racked her brain for the answer because she knew she'd seen him before. There was a time she almost had it, where there was blood and screaming, but she couldn't find the face in all that mess. Maybe he dropped it and forgot to pick it up. A younger man stood in the basement, and Vicky hadn't heard him come down either. The two men had simply manifested. There stood a wire dog cage, too, like the ones in the other room, and she swore it hadn't been there before. She realized for the first time that the older man was naked, and he squatted to meet her eyes. "Do you know who you are?" he asked. "I'm Vicky." The younger man's hands were small, but Vicky's whole face still hurt after he hit her. Her whole world flipped. Patterns spun in the ceiling, and her heart spun in her chest. Her senses sharpened and dulled. She saw everything, heard everything, and felt everything, but there was too much of everything to understand. The older man scolded her. "No, wrong. You're not Vicky. You're nobody." He dragged her to the cage with ease despite the flailing. He tossed her inside and closed the door. "You are no one. You are nothing." The younger man held up a mirror to her face. She didn't recognize it. She thought she saw shapes in it that she recognized, but it was so unfamiliar. Vicky had hair, didn't she? And she didn't have such ugly spots, the color of spoiled fruit. Vicky wasn't so haggard. The face in the mirror looked sick. The younger man showed her a picture. "This is Vicky," he snarled, then pointed to the mirror. "Who is that woman?" Vicky couldn't answer. The older man echoed. "Who is this woman?" I don't know. I don't know who that is." "That's you. That's who you are. Is that Vicky? Is that you?" She wept no over and over again. The men each took one of Lola's arms and dragged her out of the room. The nameless one they left behind reached out for the corpse and begged for them to leave her friend because she didn't want to be alone in the dark. The door shut and the darkness came again, and she was alone. The name she'd found on the floor in the dark, what was it? The core of her world melted when the light went away, and even the name she'd looked so hard for was as impermanent as a flowing river. The concept of self as fragile as smoke. It had been there, and now it was gone. The damp basement air had taken it, and now she had nothing. And then he came. Hungover from dehydration, weak from the madness and the visions, still sick from the water, she awoke in the darkness to a low, gentle voice and the creaking of old stairs. The voice sang a gospel song. His voice was a pleasant thing, rich and bassy, the only soothing thing she could think of since being taken. Light flooded the little room and temporarily blinded her. He was handsome. He was more handsome than she remembered. His long black hair was brushed and his beard combed. The white shirt was ironed, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows to reveal big forearms. She smelled soap. Her heart settled, and the blood in her veins slowed down. He seemed so kind. The panic climbed up from her bowels and along her spine. Across the back of her neck, her hair stood at attention. Something was wrong. She didn't know what yet, but she saw his face and she saw blood. She saw its features twisted into an ugly mask of pleasure and hatred, and she knew it wasn't a mask. It didn't hide anything. There was nothing else behind it. He crouched low to the floor and met her gaze. The smile was soft and kind. "Don't be a fool," the panic told her. "It's a game. He's playing an angle."
"You look sad. What's wrong?"
You monster!" She hadn't noticed before, but he carried a satchel, and he opened it now, taking out plastic Tupperware containers. The air was so cool that when he opened the containers, fat tongues of steam rose up from the hot food. The warm, starchy smell of seasoned rice, the rich, tangy aroma of beans, chicken, asparagus, each scent layered on top of the last as he opened the containers.
"You look hungry. My name is Temujin. Would you like some of my food?"
She tried to stare him down, to keep her gaze angry and focused on him, but her eyes kept drifting back to the food. Her stomach ached. She was so hungry that the heavy aroma almost made her nauseous, but she was also too hungry to care. If she had to puke it all up again, she gladly would, if only for the morsels that stayed in her stomach. What the hell are you doing?" The question was supposed to be strong and bold, meant to project strength, but as soon as it was out, she recognized the frailty of the voice carrying it. She was so tired. She didn't have the strength to keep up the panic or the fury. She just wanted to sleep and eat.
"I brought food for us to share. I thought you'd be hungry."
He picked up a fork and ate some of the rice.
"It's very good. The men tell me I'm a good cook."
Her mind reeled.
"Do you want some?"
he asked. He put a cube of chicken in his mouth and closed his eyes as he chewed it. He added some rice. It all smelled so good. The chicken looked so tender and moist, and the rice smelled like safety. The beans and asparagus were an extra decadence, and the man had more than enough. Her mouth flooded. She'd never done that before, never noticed that she salivated.
"Would you like some?"
She scrambled to the front of the cage and stuck her fingers through the narrow spaces between the bars. Like an animal, she groped with them for the fork. The rational side of her, the part that knew better, the part that was still human, told her that she was sure to knock the rice off of the fork if she even got it, but she didn't care. She needed food. She needed this food. The big man shook his head.
No, no. Put your face up to the cage and open your mouth. I'll feed you. You'll get sick if you eat too fast.
She obliged. She didn't even hear what her panic told her to do. It may as well have been 1,000 miles away despite its screaming. She pressed her face against the bars and opened her mouth. Temujin brought the fork close, and she stuck out her tongue to catch any of the grains that might fall. She ignored the burgeoning sense of humiliation, suppressing it, even forgetting it as the fork drew closer and closer. Her mouth closed around the warm rice, and every nerve in her body exploded. Temujin withdrew the fork.
Is it good?
Yes, more.
Temujin smiled and gave her more.
He brought the fork to her mouth slowly. He placed the rice on her tongue and waited until she closed her mouth before pulling the fork out from between her lips. After several mouthfuls of rice, he cut the asparagus into small pieces and fed her that, too. He didn't ask. Temujin simply delivered. Once the asparagus was gone, he fed her the cut chicken and the rice and beans, and she ate them with such gluttony that the juice, so warm, dribbled down her chin. Each time, he waited until her lips were closed around it before he pulled it out. Even when she thought she had her fill, he still gave her more. She mewled and grunted with her face pressed against the bars, grains of rice and green shreds of asparagus sticking to grease smeared around the whole of her mouth. With meek animal sounds, she begged for more.
Is it good?
Temujin asked again. She nodded, and he smiled.
Thank you. I made it. I learned how to cook from my mother. My father left us when I was a boy. She raised me by herself.
He brought the fork back to her open mouth, and their gazes touched. His eyes were bright and green. They paused there, and in that space she saw the apprehensive boy who had built a monster around him.
I was all alone except for her. Do you understand?
She nodded. He looked down at the food and gathered another bite. When he raised his face, the little boy was gone, hidden away in the corners of the bright green eyes.
Good, the monster said. I'm glad you understand.
He gave her one last bite and then wiped her face with a paper napkin, pushing his fingers between the bars.
Are you ready to come out?
She hesitated, and that was enough. Temujin's eyes dimmed with disappointment and his mouth hardened.
I see.
He packed away the empty containers in silence. The stairs groaned as he left the basement. She was alone in the darkness again.
Cosmo, December 9th, 2024.
Cosmo went to the meeting at the river. He listened to Edvard Grieg on the Jaguar's souped-up sound system, and his mind turned over thoughts of shapeless violence like a tongue shifting a peppermint to the other cheek. It had been a bad week for the friends. This was unprecedented. Back in the day, nobody would have even thought of knocking over a friend's joint. Nobody had the muscle, and certainly nobody had the balls. But here was a group of lunatics who'd done just that, who'd not only knocked the place over, but stole 3 girls and left the money. The world was going nuts. This wouldn't have happened back in the day. The friends had gotten fat and complacent. Mr. Greaves had sunk to an accountant rather than the master of his dominion, and they were losing everything because of it. Whoever those crazies were, they'd declared war, and it was time to strike back. Mr. Greaves needed to bend the world over and once again make it obey. The other old men were already at the riverbank when he arrived, surrounded by their $100,000 cars soiled by winter dirt and caked with road salt. Clearly at the center of attention was Lou Greaves, the Friends' leader. He was small and thin, his face traced with aged crevices. He was younger than he looked. The weight of his position bore down on him unkindly. Cosmo parked the Jaguar behind Ray's BMW, and the snow and barren space of the river made the thunk of the door bang like a silenced gunshot. The seasoned old men jumped at the sound. The young sons didn't seem to notice at all. Cosmo buttoned up his long cashmere coat and shoved his hands into his pocket. It's fucking cold.
You sure took a long time getting here, Cos.
Eddie jeered. Cosmo gave him a sardonic smile. He was surprised the fattened Eddie's wrinkled neck hadn't immobilized his vocal cords. The huge old pimp probably couldn't even find his dick with a rescue team. I got held up. Cops are still crawling up my ass about the hills. He gave a quiet groan and shook his head. It's a nightmare. A fucking horror show in there. Absolute fucking nightmare.
Who'd you manage to grab?
Nobody, Cosmo replied, hands out, shaking his head and rolling his shoulders. All my guys are dead except Mike, who wasn't there. Mario and Steve and Peter, even my fucking DJ, Xavier, they're all dead. I got nobody in there. Mr. Greaves raised his pensive gaze from the snow.
We'll get you new guys. What happened?
Cosmo shook his head again. It took him some time to begin and some time to finish, but he recounted the events of the raid. He kept to the facts, though his mind often drifted to the staccato flowers of gunfire and the ripe scent of blood. He left out how he cowered in a corner under a table, peeking out from behind the black tablecloth with ragged, panicked breaths. They're psychos. Bona fide fucking psychopaths like Ed Gein and Ted fucking Bundy, Eiffel Towered Freddy fucking Krueger. Gene asked,
Why'd they hit your place?
He was another old man, like Cosmo and Eddie. He ran the gambling rings on the east side until Mr. Greaves took control and was elevated to chairman. He advised Mr. Greaves on everything. Cosmo didn't think he was much help. Cosmo shrugged. Hell if I know, never seen them in my life. Eddie thumbed his nose and gazed into the distance, clearly trying to determine if he should speak.
I think it's connected to this thing.
His voice was unsteady.
I think that freak pimp from the projects is making a move.
Cosmo furrowed his brow and scoffed. Peaches? Eddie nodded. He was uncharacteristically humble.
I imported some new girls. I've been doing it a few months, expand my market. Chinks, they're exotic, fresh, interesting. Draw in some new clients, you know what I mean?
He shrugged.
Well, the cops busted it up last night.
There was a quiet collection of disappointed sounds from the old men, the clicking of tongues, low groans, and airy sighs. Gene closed his eyes and took his hands out of his coat pockets to rub them. Eddie, what were you thinking? What in God's name were you thinking? You didn't tell us a thing. Eddie raised his hands defensively.
Look, I didn't think it was gonna be such a shit show. Remember when Rick...
Softly, Gene replied, Those days are done, Eddie. Mr. Greaves echoed the sentiment.
You should know better, Eddie. Times are tough. We've got to work together to keep this thing going.
Eddie twisted up a disgusted snarl.
When do we sing Kumbaya? I don't want to fucking miss that.
Cosmo took a step toward Eddie and shot his finger out.
That's your boss you're talking to, cocksucker!
Eddie turned on him and stretched his arms out wide.
Then when is he gonna spend less time with his side piece whore from your place and more time bossing, huh?
Cosmo's face flushed like a tomato.
You fat, worthless cocksucker!
He pulled a fist to take a swing, but Ray held him back before he could lunge at Eddie, who raised his hands and laughed.
Whoa, hey, slow down, Stallone. Wouldn't want you to break your hip.
The sons shifted uncomfortably on their feet. Most of them looked at the ground. Cosmo pushed Ray off and stood down. As he brushed himself off, he said,
You're right. If I did that, I wouldn't be able to fuck your wife anymore.
Eddie bared his teeth but didn't respond. Gene glanced at Mr. Greaves, who watched the scene with a dispassionate eye, his hands clasped together behind his back. Gene raised his own palms and stepped between the two. Calm down, both of you. What's the fighting about? Calm down. Cosmo raised his eyebrows high.
Did you hear what he said? Did you hear?
Do you think it was peaches that hit your place, Cos? Gene said. Cosmo grit his teeth and glared at Gene, glanced at Mr. Greaves, who seemed to be preoccupied more with the snow on the ground than the discussion at hand, and then sucked his cheek like he'd just eaten something sour. He shook his head and looked at the river. Who else? Gene sighed. The snowflakes were wet and heavy. Mr. Greaves brushed off a pile growing on his shoulder.
It's sticking.
Eddie shook his head.
Unfucking believable.
Nate shrugged.
It could be anyone. Peaches is just the most likely.
You really think it's gonna be some freak hustler that spends all day smoking dope and getting his rod polished?
Like Gene said, who the fuck else then?
Gene held up a hand. Who do we have that can figure this out? The old men looked at him as if he were an alien. Ray asked,
Like a cop?
He shot a glance at Cosmo.
Gene, the cops don't know who did this.
The cops don't work like we do. They're slow. Cos, your place got hit. Who do you know who can track these guys down? Vic, one of the sons, casually raised a hand. What about Johnny? The circle of friends froze. All eyes fell on Vic. Eddie said,
Did someone fucking address you?
Cosmo put a hand out between Eddie and Vic.
No, go on. Johnny the Bean.
Vic grimaced.
Yeah, Johnny Fava.
Cosmo pondered for a while, and then said slowly,
Yeah, Johnny Bean could do it. He's a smart kid.
Eddie scoffed.
Little Johnny Bean? He's not made. You gonna trust him with this?
At last, Mr. Greaves spoke.
Johnny's a good choice.
The old men shifted,
the snow crunching in battered unison as they looked at him. Mr. Greaves nodded.
I knew his father.
Cosmo offered a smile. It's fucking settled then. Good talk, guys. Eddie put out his hands. Whoa, hey, wait just a goddamn second. What about the hit on my goods last night? What are you gonna do about that, Lou? Mr. Greaves glared at Eddie, but no one seemed to notice, and the uncomfortable silence of waiting filled the circle a little too long. Mr. Greaves finally replied.
The girls were never sanctioned, Eddie. I can't offer my protection.
Gene added. I'm sorry, Eddie, you know the rules. The rules my ass, Gene. We're scraping and you're talking to me like Angela fucking Merkel. Mr. Greaves didn't add anything else. He shot another glare at Eddie, who fumed at Gene. Finally, he said,
I think that's everything, gentlemen. You let me know if there's anything to report.
Eddie took off his hat and ran his fingers through his thinning hair. He muttered all the way to his car and slammed the door. Ray shook his head and leered at Gene like he was going to say something, but decided better of it and left. In a somewhat better mood, the sons dispersed shortly after.
Johnny, December 9th, 2024.
The flakes stopped falling around the time Johnny got to his father's grave. He squatted down and wiped the snow away from the headstone with a bare hand. His fingers lingered on the letters. It read, Antonio Fava, loving husband, father, and fighter. The family had wanted to put soldier instead of fighter, but the engravers wouldn't once they figured out that Antonio had never served in any war, nor had he been enlisted in any armed force. A different kind of soldier, then. Fighter was good enough. Hey, Dad. It's real fucking cold, huh? How you doing? Antonio never liked the cold. But what he liked about the cold were the things that gravitate around it. He liked the woolen hats and warm cocktails. He liked Thanksgiving and Christmas and a cigarette after a big meal. Thanksgiving had already gone, and though it had been hard, Johnny had carried the dark heft of grief through to the other side, and he was okay. He crouched beside the headstone with his arm around it and smoked a cigarette while he talked. 3 cigarettes in, Cosmo appeared as a small, dark figure walking through the snow. He had his hands buried deep into his pockets and used them to pull his long black coat tight around him. When he got close, he stood over Johnny and shook his head. Christ almighty! I don't know how the hell you do it, Johnny. It's colder than a witch's tit in a brass bra out here. It's gonna get colder. High at 36, said the weatherman. Cosmo shook his head. There ain't hardly enough daylight in the winter, let me tell you. Fucking 8 hours. Yeah, it's the winter. Cosmo pulled the corners of his mouth down and cocked his head, shifting slightly. He sighed through his nose. How you doing, kid? Johnny pulled on his cigarette and nodded. I'm alright, Cos. What's up? I got a job for you. Yeah? Cosmo nodded. It's a big one. Johnny's pulse quickened. Big? Yeah, kid. Cosmo grinned and cocked an eyebrow, nodding again. Real big. Antonio had been made at 20, a respectable, even impressive age. Johnny had missed that boat, but maybe... Sure, I'll do it. What's the rub? Cosmo explained what Mr. Greaves wanted. He pushed on the boss's name, made sure Johnny knew where the request came from. A few times, Johnny had hunted down sponges with bad gambling debts, and sometimes he even liked shaking deadbeats down for a lead. Once he'd broken a college kid's knee because he wouldn't tell him where his brother was hiding. Everyone was brave until they got hit with a baseball bat. Johnny wasn't sure about this gig.
Why don't we just wait for the cops to get them and bust them up after? This sounds like it's a little out of our league, Kaz.
Cosmo's big grin slipped off his face.
What are you saying, Johnny?
Johnny faltered.
This is some serious puts the lotion on the skin sort of shit, like FBI kind of shit, you know? Yeah, so they've got to have real smart guys working on this. You really want to get close to it? You don't think that's not going to draw attention?
Cosmo spread his hands wide.
Mr. Greaves is asking, not me.
Johnny kept his mouth shut after that. At last, he said,
You really think it's gonna get me made? It's your best shot, kid. Shit.
Johnny put out his cigarette and glanced back at his father's headstone.
Your dad would have taken it.
It was a low blow, but it was cold. Cosmo bounced on the balls of his feet like an undignified kid who needed to pee.
All right, Kaz. I'll do it.
Cosmo found his smile again.
That's a good boy.
He risked taking his hand out of its warm pocket to pat Johnny on the face.
That's a good Johnny Bean. You find those cocksuckers and you roast them.
He put his hand back into his pocket.
I gotta get going. Got shit to do.
As Cosmo trudged through the snow to his car, Johnny studied the headstone once more.
Finally, Dad. It's my chance.
He swallowed, not certain if his father would have approved.
Deborah, December 9th, 2024.
The party was in full swing at Penthouse Gomorrah. Through the doorways at each landing, Deborah saw little glimpses of debauchery that would make even a Russian czar blush. All of Peach's girls had been prettied up. He'd bought new clothes for them, made sure they had enough makeup to cover up the bruises, and summoned them for entertainment. Freddie nearly tripped over a small pile of empty champagne bottles that spilled out of the third floor. Deborah's eyes were drawn to open doors with men being spanked by women, men with a woman at each end of him, and people sprawled in the hallway, emptying more liquor bottles down their throat and doing lines off each other's bodies. Deborah had to remind herself that the girls had been trained through necessity to be actresses. Everyone in the building seemed to be enjoying themselves, and it disgusted her more than a little. They were surprised that no one stood guard. The two detectives entered Peaches' room with more caution than they would have if someone had waited to intercept them. It was a silly endeavor. The music was too loud and nobody cared. Peaches' carelessness disappointed Deborah. He should have known that now was no time to celebrate. More than ever, Peaches needed to be on his guard. He was marked by dangerous men unaccustomed to losing power, but losing it quicker than they could process. That made them feral. They found Peaches in an open room that must have once been 3. He was sprawled over pillows that took up the entire floor while sultry R&B moaned through enormous speakers. He wore a toga, and the shoulders of a well-built man peeked from between Peaches' legs. The strange, dim light cast shadows in the valleys of the man's back and highlighted the peaks of his muscles as he moved his head to accommodate the pimp, who groaned with lidded eyes as his teeth peeked from behind his silly grin. The two detectives stood above Peaches at the edge of the pillows, looking down upon him. Deborah bent over and tapped him on the shoulder. Peaches ignored her, lifted his toga to thread his fingers through the man's dark hair, and slammed his hips into the man's face. Deborah raised her boot and pressed the side against Peaches' shoulder. That got his attention. It got the attention of the whole room. The pimp sprang out of the man's mouth and off the pillows, scampering away from the surprise of Deborah's boot. She squatted down to his level, wrists resting on her knees. "You owe us an address," she said. The music swallowed her words, but she was certain Peaches got her gist. He frowned and glared at her. Then he stood and fixed his toga. He jerked his head and thumb in the direction of the hallway. The deeper they went into the complex, the more the sounds of music faded into sex. Flesh slapping against flesh with rough, wet smacks, moans of pleasure and grunts of pain. Peaches took them to a door marked emergency exit and thrust it open, exposing the three to the chilly night air. Peaches wedged a brick between the door and the frame, picked up a pack of Virginia Slims hidden behind the brick, and lit up. Deborah and Freddie waited for him to begin, but he simply leaned on the railing and observed the city's muddy night sky. Deborah repeated herself, growling. "You owe us information, Peaches. We did what you asked." Peaches didn't move his body, only his eyes. They flicked to Deborah and he cocked an eyebrow. Didn't it feel good to do something right for a change? Now it was Freddie's turn to snarl. "Where did the girl live, Frank?" His face was pale and his eyes were wide and dark. It made Deborah want to step away, but she restrained herself. Peaches flicked the cigarette into the street below. "There's a shipment of meth coming in next week," he said. "I imagine you won't have a problem ignoring it." Deborah gave him the benefit of the doubt and took the statement as a joke. She offered a flat, unconvincing chuckle, but forgot to make her face match. Peaches cocked his head. "Did I say something funny?" "Not very. An address. We kept our end of the bargain." The pimp stretched his arms out like Cristo Redentor and beamed. "That was just a trial run," he exclaimed, vibrating with excitement. "We have so much more work to do." In Deborah's heart, a wolf escaped the fortress's prison. It moved quickly and without much thought. Like lightning, she sent an uppercut into Peach's jaw. He reeled from the blow. She followed up with a cross. Peaches talked big, but he was a small man and Deborah was a strong woman. The beating was swift and merciless and only lasted a few more blows. It was no time at all before he crumpled in a heap on the dirty concrete, rolling around in dried pigeon shit in agony. Deborah knelt beside him and squeezed his cheeks together to stop his writhing, and she jerked his head to make him look at her. She glared into the tears welling in his eyes. "I know there's a rumor that I'm some sort of Cato," she began, speaking quickly, spitting out the words with tiny, quiet fury. "But that shouldn't mean that I'm a fucking pushover, got it? I do what I say I'm gonna do, and what I say I do is protect people." She jerked his face left and right, scraping against a mound of bird shit. "As far as I'm concerned, you're outside the protective boundaries of those pretty words." She pinched his nose and twisted it. "Now, I want you to keep in mind that there's a loud party going on downstairs, full of real shitty people in a real shitty part of town, so I don't think there'd be a lot of inquiry into the death of a pathetic crook who's too big for his britches but too small for big boy pants." Her eyes were so hard and cold they might have been stones. The dark wolf, now in the halls of her fortress, growled. "You want to give me what I want now, Peaches?" The pimp was beaten, and he knew It took a lot out of a man who was so determined to win, so often overcompensating to finally concede a loss. Peaches cowered below Deborah, merely one more in a long, long line of Icaruses. He sputtered incoherently in Deborah's grip, and when she loosened it, he said, Cinnamon Tree Apartments. That's where the dead whore lived." "You can't expect us to believe that," Freddy groaned. Peaches raised his hands, half in defense and half in supplication. "Thee here, that's what thee told me. That's what I heard. I sent my men there, and that's where they found her. Thee was a good girl, though I never had to go there personally to knock her around. You can't hold me responsible for what a young tart with delusions of grandeur does, says, or thinks. I swear that's what I know." His eyes trembled in their sockets while Deborah held his gaze. She saw her reflection in his pupils. Never once had she seen the woman glaring back at her while she was on this side of the world. Just to fuck with Peaches, Deborah held him a little longer and did so with more pleasure than she was comfortable with. Roughly, she let him go, thrusting his head against the concrete so that it would bounce a little and make him feel a little smaller than he already did. "Enjoy your party," she said. Peaches curled up and cowered. Freddy hesitated before following Deborah to the door leading to the complex. He looked back at Peaches. Deborah waited until he was next to her, and then opened the door. She freed screams from within the building. But they weren't screams of decadence anymore. The breathy sighs and guttural moans that had filled the hall only a few minutes before were now frantic. All that soft, breathy pleasure was replaced with high, throaty terror. Sandpaper screams raked across the air. They tore at the slow, seductive rhythm of the R&B fog. Men shouted inquiries that Deborah couldn't make out. They punctuated them with gunfire. 3 quick shots, and the music ceased. The auditory fog was lifted. The nightmare was made evident. The 2 detectives drew their guns and pressed against opposite walls. Deborah's whole body clenched. As she advanced, she almost tripped over a naked man. She thought he was passed out, but then she slipped on the blood. "Focus, Deborah. Concentrate. You've stumbled into hostile territory. What do you do?" She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, her guard was back up, her mind refocused, her body prepared for violence. She let the wolf out freely. She shot her gaze to Freddy. His grim expression was fierce and stoic. His eyes were present, but with enough of that faraway detachment that Deborah trusted him to provide objectivity. Deborah signaled to him and they advanced. She cocked her gun and kept close to the wall. As they got closer to the penthouse's main room, the voices became clear.
"All right, I want to know which of you motherfuckers hit our boat. Who tipped off the cops, huh? You want to talk? No?"
The questions were rhetorical, and the person being asked seemed to know. He whimpered, wept, and begged for his life, but it was useless. He could hardly put together a coherent sentence while pleading for his life, much less reveal secrets about the gang's operations. His assailant knew it too. Deborah reached the mouth of the hallway and held a hand back to Freddy for him to stop. The man shouting questions raised his gun to the head of the young man who'd been sucking Peaches' cock. There was a short, blunt when the muzzle flashed, and then a thud as the man dropped to the side. In the shocked silence, it was easy to hear the tiny chimes the bullet casing made as it hit the floor. Deborah recognized the man asking questions as Jerry Masters, and though she didn't know him well, he wasn't known as a murderer, just a racketeer, she knew his association with Eddie Trine and the Friends. Jerry held his arms out to his sides, frowned and raised his eyebrows.
Look, guys, I got nothing else to do on a Monday. I can do this all night.
It was a show, like open mic at the comedy club, and he wore a satisfied little grin. His buddies behind him sniggered like cartoon characters.
Look, guys, I got nothing else to do on a Monday. I can do this all night. I'm hourly. You tell me or not, I still get paid. For a guy like me, killing freaks is about as good as cracking tickets.
He took a single step down the line and raised his gun to the next person's head. He asked her,
You gonna talk, sweetheart? Or are you gonna join Don Juan de Cocksucker down there?
Her ability to communicate was little better than the man's before her. Jerry pulled up the legs of his wide slacks and crouched down to her eye level. With the barrel of his gun, he pushed up her chin.
Hey,
he said, voice steeped in saccharine sweetness.
Baby, there's nothing to be afraid of. Just talk to me and everything's gonna be alright, you got it?
She sobbed and nodded. Jerry shifted his stance to come a little closer to her.
Where's King Freak, huh? That's the one we want.
Deborah couldn't wait anymore. She burst into the room and shouted the obligatory, "Put down the gun!" But she didn't wait for any of the gangsters to comply. She squeezed 2 bullets into the chest of a thick man with greasy hair and then shot the man next to him before the big guy's Uzi hit the floor. Freddy was right beside her, and after he shouted, he shot too. Jerry was a coward, and though he got a couple of shots in, he seemed to realize he was outclassed. Before the surviving members of his crew had time to notice, Jerry was gone, evaporated from the room like smoke. Deborah and Freddy incapacitated the men he left behind, and they walked among the wounded, taking their guns. Peaches' people were already gone. Cops, and then Eddie Trine's thugs. It was too much heat. They were sex workers and tourist drug dealers and hired muscle. They had no loyalty. They didn't need any. The party was over, and trouble had come, and like roaches at the shine of light, they'd panicked and scattered. The detectives didn't feel compelled to question the thugs. It wasn't their case, and anyway, they knew what happened. The retaliatory attempt provided convenient cover for Deborah's lack of discretion. Nobody would believe she was here during the firefight. After Freddy made an anonymous call to the station about the attack, he hadn't said a word to Deborah. A rope of tension pulled tight between them. They maintained their silence until they got to the car. Freddy stared at his hands on his thighs while Deborah fastened her seatbelt and put the keys in the ignition. Just as she was about to turn them, Freddy spoke.
What the fuck was that?
He asked. His words moved like a bird with a broken wing. Deborah didn't want to have this talk.
What the fuck was what, Freddy?
The words were flat, a stagnant pool.
I haven't seen you like that in a long time, Deb. I don't like it.
Deborah turned on the car.
We have an address.
She stated it as a point of fact. Freddy didn't argue because he knew it was true. They turned at the stop sign at the end of the street just as the red and blue lights flashed into view. Deborah was surprised at the bitterness inside of her when she realized that the ambulance got to Penthouse Gomorrah first. The clock had already pushed into double digits when Deborah came home. The bright electric light of the TV lit up the apartment, and she assumed that Adam had stayed up late to scold her again. She took off her coat and rubbed her eyes. "Hey, Pop," she murmured as she shambled to the couch. Shaylee put a finger up against her lips and hushed her aunt, then leaned back against her grandfather, a mug of hot cocoa between her little hands. Adam had a bowl of popcorn settled on his lap, one hand resting on the bowl while the other stroked his granddaughter's hair. The TV went almost completely white. It hurt Deborah's eyes.
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose.
Isn't it a bit early to watch Christmas movies? Deborah teased.
It's already December, Auntie, Shaylee explained. It's the only time you can watch Christmas movies.
Deborah nodded sagely. That's very true, baby girl. She put a hand on Adam's shoulder and kissed his head. How you doing, Pop? The corners of Adam's mouth tugged down, exaggerated by the wrinkles surrounding them, and he looked through Deborah as if she were a ghost. He hesitated. He turned thoughts over in his head until at last he turned away.
I'm fine, Debbie.
He filled his mouth with popcorn and chewed slowly. Shaylee peered up at Deborah from the rim of her hot chocolate. She took a big, noisy sip.
Did you get all the bad guys yet, Auntie?
Deborah shook her head. No, sorry, baby girl, I still got more to catch. Shaylee dropped her smile and it cracked on the floor.
Oh. Are you hungry? Pop made spaghetti.
I love spaghetti. I think I'll heat some up right away. I'm starving. The little girl looked at the TV, then at Deborah, and then she plonked her mug on the coffee table. She followed Deborah into the kitchen and hugged her waist.
I know you like spaghetti because Pop told me you did.
Deborah stroked her hair. Did he? Shaylee nodded.
He did. He told me a story how you saw a movie and decided you loved spaghetti more than anything.
Do you remember the name of that movie? Shaylee shook her head.
No, but Pop said it had something to do with dogs.
The microwave groaned. Deborah crouched down and hugged Shaylee back. The movie's called Lady and the Tramp. Have you ever seen it? Along Deborah's shoulder, Shaylee's chin slid back and forth. Well, we'll have to watch it sometime. Shaylee pushed Deborah away, keeping her hands on a partial embrace and locked eyes with her.
Really?
Deborah nodded. Yeah, baby girl, we'll watch it.
Promise?
Deborah smiled. Yeah, of course. Shaylee's face exploded into a smile.
Maybe this weekend, after rehearsal.
Her voice took on a high, frantic tuning. Deborah's heart broke. Not this weekend, sweetie. I've got to go catch bad guys. Shaylee nodded, her face returning to the practiced blankness of consistent disappointment, and she walked away, mumbling about how she understood. On the television, Burl Ives kept singing as if nothing was wrong in the world. Deborah ate her spaghetti at the kitchen table while her father and niece stayed on the couch. From across the chasm of silence, Adam asked how it tasted, and she shoveled another lump into her mouth, bobbed her head, and said it was so good. After she washed her bowl, she finally sat down with them. They'd gotten through the scene with the Yeti before Shaylee stretched with a yawn twice her size.
That sounds like a tired little girl,
Adam remarked. Shaylee ignored him and nudged her aunt.
I don't know why you don't take care of the bad guys like they take care of the Yeti, she grumbled.
Deborah used to wonder that too. Once upon a time, the power of song and friendship would have been enough. But she looked at her niece pouting between her and Adam, thinking about Lucinda and all her butchered parts, the look of horror plastered on her decapitated head. Deborah thought about her sister, Shaylee's mother, and all the grotesqueries that had become of her. Susanna hadn't been cut apart like Lucinda, but she'd been mutilated in other ways. The bad guys would not respond to kindness. For whatever reason, kindness was not part of their world anymore. 3 stories below the Samson clan, a war raged on the city's streets. Kindness never won any wars. Deborah put her arm around Shaylee, who ignored it. It was a paltry gesture, but Deborah said, "I wish I could too, baby girl." Shaylee didn't speak at all until she went to bed soon after, and only then to say goodnight. Deborah understood. She followed Shaylee into her bedroom, tucked her in, and kissed her cheek. The girl turned, facing away. Deborah told her goodnight, but she didn't reply. At the door, Deborah took in the little shape under the blanket. Shaylee would be a good girl. She'd have more opportunities than any Samson before her. Deborah would make sure of that. She sat next to Adam on the couch and put an arm around his shoulders. "Hey, Pop." Adam grunted. His mouth was still bent into a fish's frown. He grabbed a fistful of popcorn and chewed. The crunch was loud. Deborah leaned over to the bowl and grabbed a kernel. Adam shot her a death glare. "You gonna be home for Christmas?" he snapped. "Yeah, Pop." Adam's jaw clenched and his brow furrowed just a little deeper. "I promise. How are you doing?" Adam grabbed more popcorn. "I'm alright. You know, Shaylee's got a pageant they're doing at school. She's gonna be a narrator." Deborah beamed. "No way, that's awesome." Adam closed his eyes, deepened his frown in an appreciative way, and nodded. "That's right, she got the most important role." The corners of his mouth tried to pull up, reflexive to the pride, but it was in his nature to scowl, so he fought them back down. He rubbed his mouth like he was trying to get rid of any trace. "What's a pageant anyway, Debbie? Why don't they just call it a play?" "A pageant is about history, Pop. It's supposed to help teach the kids about the thing the pageant is about." "Shaylee showed me the script she got today, and it don't talk about Jesus, Debbie." Adam rubbed his naked scalp. "That don't seem right to me." "What does it talk about?" "Santa Claus coming from Sweden or Germany or something. I thought Coca-Cola made him." "Is it about Santa Claus or Christmas?" Adam scoffed and threw his hands into the air. "It's about crazy if you ask me." He shook his head, then paused while he shot Deborah another dour look. "You gonna come to that?" "What, the pageant?" Probably." Adam's face exploded with incredulity. He shook his head and made a few disapproving grunts. "Pop, I can't promise anything right now." "You just promised Christmas." "I'm trying to catch the man who shot up the Fred Meyer." "I thought you were trying to catch some man who killed a hooker." I am. I thought your man Mr. Hardigan told you not to go after those crazy folks who shot up the Fred Meyer. You're supposed to find the garden variety crazy that killed the hooker." "I think they're the same people who killed the girl." "Now a girl got killed?" "The prostitute, Pop." "You're telling me you can't find anybody to take the night shift on a case you ain't even supposed to be working on so that you can come see your nieces play?" "It's a pageant." "You missed Thanksgiving because you were working." "They've killed or injured almost 40 people." "She's a goddamn narrator." Deborah ran a hand through her hair and grimaced. She sighed through her nostrils and rested her cheek against her palm. Rudolph was over, and Netflix switched to A Christmas Carol, the one with the Muppets. Deborah loved that one. She was so tired, and it was so nice to let go and get lost in the movie. She almost forgot about Adam. She did forget about him until the couch shifted as he stood and issued his low, disapproving grunts again. Deborah kneaded her forehead and poured a whiskey. She watched the Muppets until she fell asleep.
Johnny, December 10th, 2024.
Interviewing Cosmo's whores was more tedious than Johnny anticipated. Cosmo had a lot of whores, and though they were narrowed down to those who worked at Rolling Hills, there were still a lot of girls who worked there. Most of them couldn't remember one John from the next and talked about their experiences as if they literally saw the same face on every man who fucked them. More than once, he had the same exchange. They would have been big, like real fucking big. Honey, everyone thinks they're big. No, you would have noticed. Johnny Bean, when you've had as much dick as me, big ain't so big, and you stop noticing. What the fuck do you know about this guy's cock anyway? It was enough to make him want to bang his head against the wall. When they weren't making dick jokes or being obstinate, they hung out their shingle with lewd, thinly veiled suggestions that irritated the hell out of Johnny. He'd never wanted to get laid less in his life, and the fact that he knew the girls who engaged in the seduction believed they'd curry favor with the friends by throwing him a free blowjob made his libido retreat in a way that he never thought possible. But at last, after what seemed like an endless line of dead ends, he found a lead in Jackie. Jackie was a bitter working girl who spat salty sarcasm with a dagger-like tongue. Her brow was cast into a perpetual scowl that never smoothed, and her mouth was always set into a flat line. Johnny had heard of her before from Cosmo. From the descriptions, Johnny never understood how she could be such an asset to Rolling Hills. As she sat across from him, a Nat Sherman protruding from her Cupid's bow lips, he understood. Jackie was a knockout, pure and simple. She looked so good, she could afford to be a bitch. In fact, the distance she created between herself and all men was likely part of the carefully calculated appeal. If you have to ask how much, you can't afford it. Her apartment was way nicer than a whore's place usually was. The furniture was new and clean and fancy as hell. The carpet was fresh, likely just installed, and Jackie had the audacity to bluntly insist that Johnny remove his shoes before taking a step past the patch of marble floor onto the other side of the door. Mr. Greaves owned this building. Jackie must be his side piece. She had him come outside onto the balcony. I have to smoke whenever I have tedious conversations, she explained. It gives me something to do. After she led the conversation, she bobbed her head and beckoned him with a circular motion of the hand. Come on, talk to me. I got better things to do. Johnny couldn't agree more. There was snow on the balcony. At least Jackie had slippers. She shot him a look when he took out his pack of Winstons. Don't blow it in my face, she said. Johnny gave her a strange look and she chafed. The smoke, dumbass. For Christ's sake, get your head out of the gutter. You know anything about the guys who fucked up Rolling Hills? Why the fuck would I know anything about that? Those guys, they came to the place like they knew what it was like, so I figure they cased it beforehand. Jackie scowled. The peaks of her eyebrows arched higher, and her lips curled back like a panther's snarl. You think I was in on it? He didn't show it, but Johnny was a little taken aback. Jackie was awfully defensive, maybe a little too much. He made a mental note of the reaction and said, No, Jackie, that's fucking stupid. I'm asking all the girls what they know. She sucked on her cigarette and glared at him through the smoke. What are they telling you? Johnny shrugged. Nobody knows nothing. Jackie flicked the butt of her cigarette with the long blue nail of her thumb. Her nails were real. You never saw that anymore, Johnny thought. Girls just bought their nails or kept them short. Nobody grew them out. They didn't have the patience. Jackie sat there in the cold with a little more than her underwear. Her legs crossed and just stared at him for a while, smoking. It was an unsettling feeling. He could feel her gaze as it passed over him, almost as a physical thing, like it was her long nails raking across his skin. He couldn't imagine what she was searching for. You're not a bad-looking guy, Johnny Bean. Anybody ever tell you that? Johnny thought, anyone ever tell you I fucking hate that name? No, I don't get that a whole lot.
Bullshit. I bet you hear it all the time.
You haven't answered my fucking question, Jackie. She flung her eyes off of Johnny and into the city street below. Jackie flicked her nail against the butt of her Sherman and then stared vacantly at it.
Big guys, huh?
Enormous, Jackie. Maybe the biggest motherfuckers you've ever seen, like Arnold fucking Schwarzenegger. Still not giving Johnny her eyes, Jackie took a final drag of her cigarette, sucking in her cheeks for a long pull, and then stubbed out the spent remainder in the porcelain ashtray on the little glass table beside her.
I wasn't there the night the thing went down, so I don't know what they looked like. But there was this big guy that kept coming in. Maybe not the biggest I ever seen, but still big. Had shoulders the size of baby heads. Definitely the biggest shoulders I've ever seen. He was a regular, but a new one. First he just started coming in on Tuesdays.
Any idea why Tuesdays?
Rolling Hills runs promos on Tuesdays.
What'd he get? Jackie shifted a little in her chair and gave Johnny a look like he should know that he wasn't supposed to be making her feel so uncomfortable. Johnny didn't remove his eyes. He flicked the cigarette and took another hard pull. He wiggled his toes in the cold. Johnny the Bean wasn't going anywhere. It was clear that Jackie was uncomfortable with this kind of exchange. She was used to being in control of the conversation.
He was new, like I said, so at first I don't think he understood what Rolling Hills was.
Jackie kept her gaze on him. It pled with him to understand and leave it at that. Johnny took another pull of smoke. His gaze didn't retreat. Jackie tapped her nail against the armrest of the chair, stalling. She reached for another cigarette and lit it with an ornate silver lighter. Johnny remarked, "That's a nice lighter."
"Oh, this?"
she asked, holding up the lighter.
"It was a gift. Lou gave it to me. You know Lou, right? You probably know him as Mr. Greaves."
She smiled ruefully at him, and the tension slid off her face and shoulders.
"It's butane. Refillable. He got it for me in Italy. Isn't it pretty? It has Saint Maria on it."
She offered it to Johnny for closer inspection, and he took it. The challenge came back into her face, and she glared at him like a fox might at a wounded dog outside the henhouse. It was an act. It was a whore's sleight of hand. Johnny pressed harder. "I know Mr. Greaves. He's the one who gave me this job, actually. He hand-picked me."
"He must think very highly of you."
"He does, actually, Jackie. He thinks real big fucking thoughts about me. In your world, I'm sure you've got a lot of muscle, seeing as how you're sucking Mr. Greaves' dick, and I'm sure out in civilian life you get away with an awful lot of shit on account of the legs and the ass." Johnny leaned forward and blew smoke into Jackie's face. "But let me tell you something. You're still just a whore. No matter whose cock you're sucking, you're still just sucking cock." Johnny sat up and let his words sink in. He flicked the spent cigarette butt at Jackie's feet. He lit another one with his Bic. She didn't even blink. She only glared daggers at him. After he shot a stream of smoke into the air above his head, Johnny locked eyes with her again. "Did he tell you to quit?" he asked. Face still cast in hard loathing, Jackie refocused her eyes to meet his, seeming to snap back to the present moment.
"What?"
She had to say it twice. It got stuck in her throat the first time and only came out as a half-formed, raspy syllable. Johnny repeated the question. "Did Mr. Greaves ask you to quit whoring?" Jackie didn't respond, so he took the stunned silence as an answer. "He gave you this place, and all the shit that's inside of it, but it's just stuff. It's not really yours. When you get ugly, sugar, then a guy like me is gonna get a call, and he'll come out with a crew to haul it all away to the next pretty whore." Johnny flicked the stalk of ash off his cigarette. He shook his head. I'm not here to play nice with you. Are you gonna help me, or am I gonna have to make you ugly? Jackie sat on the question for the rest of her cigarette, which wasn't very much. The elastic silence stretched and stretched. She stared into the snow. Johnny crossed his ankle over his knee and wiggled his toes again. Openly, he ogled Jackie while she squirmed. She finally looked back at him. What's in it for me, huh? What the fuck do I get out of it? Johnny's face split into his trademark grin and he chuckled. The fuck you think this is? Let's make a deal? You're gonna tell me what I wanna know. I don't know, you dog shit. This is Mr. Greaves asking, not me. Jackie had uncrossed her legs and her feet were now spread far from each other, her thighs pressed together. She leaned forward in the chair, forearms pressed into her knees, fingers laced together. Her face averted. She didn't speak. Silence was the only power she kept, and she clung to it with a mastiff's bite. Johnny liked her hair. She had sexy legs and a nice rack, too. Of all the girls who tried to put out on this goose chase, he almost wished that she'd been the one. But of course she wasn't. A girl like Jackie became a whore because she knew how to leverage it. Quietly, Johnny asked, "What was the guy's name?" She didn't move out of her pose and didn't raise her eyes. He called himself Patrick. And he was big. Yeah. What did this big guy named Patrick want at Rolling Hills, Jackie? He didn't know what the place was, so he just got dances at first. Once he caught on, he started getting blowjobs. Then he got a few chances to fuck some of the girls in the ass before the place got hit. How many? Jackie didn't answer, and Johnny understood. She still whored sometimes, but not for the money. She did it for the power. She did it precisely because she didn't have to, because Mr. Greaves didn't want her to. Johnny grinned again. You were the only one he fucked, huh? Jackie tried to hide a snarl behind her fingers while she lit another cigarette, but she couldn't hide the blush. Her skin was too white. Johnny could have laughed. What strange morals for a whore. He took a last long drag on his cigarette and then put it out on the patio snow. He stood up and flicked the butt over the railing, and part of him hoped it hit someone in the head. He had that fantasy whenever he flicked cigarette butts from somewhere high up. Johnny thought it'd be funny. Where'd he fuck you, Jackie? Jackie's sharp blue eyes shot a glare with enough stopping power to knock over a bull. She snarled, Where the fuck do you? Johnny raised his hands in defense. Location, Jackie, not place. I already know he fucked you in the ass. He actually felt a little bad for that one, but not bad enough to hold back his snicker. Jackie got uncooperative again. She became interested in the snow. Come on, sugar, don't hold out on me now. We were just getting to be such good friends. I want to tell Mr. Greaves you were so helpful next time I see him. Can you help me do that? He never fucking took me anywhere. He said he didn't have time to go someplace. We fucked in the back of his van behind the club. Fucking happy? Almost. What kind of van was it? Shit, Johnny, it's a fucking van. They all look the same. Soccer mom van or free candy van? The fuck is that supposed to mean? Johnny sighed and pulled out his phone. He pulled up a picture of a minivan. Jackie shook her head. Then he showed her an old heavy GMC. That one. It looked like that one. Where'd he fuck you? He'd flattened Jackie's patience into a wafer. She did a good job of holding back her expression. There's that whore's skill, Johnny thought, eyes shining. Jackie said, The back seats were taken out. There was plenty of room. Was he any good? Lightning crackled in Jackie's eyes, and she didn't say anything. Johnny held up his hands and averted his gaze in mock deference. All right, I get it. Can't all be winners. Thanks again for the help, Sugar. He put out a hand. No hard feelings, right? Jackie's nostrils flared, and Johnny smiled at the disgust on her pretty face. All right, Johnny said, bobbing his head and casting a glance to the side. I get it. Plenty of hard feelings. Thanks anyway, Sugar. Get the fuck out, Johnny Bean. Magma surged inside of him, and he watched his fist fly through the air faster than he could stop it. It cracked against Jackie's jaw and knocked her to the ground. She was too stunned to even cry out. She covered the injury with both hands, gazing up at Johnny, eyes pooling with white fear. When he flung an accusatory finger at her, she flinched and shrieked, curling tighter into herself. Johnny glowered. His voice rumbled like a busy quarry. Don't ever call me that again, he said. Then he shook out the hand that he hit her with. Johnny walked out. He shouldn't have hit her with a closed fist like that. He let his temper get the better of him. Damn, that hurt.
Thank you for sharing my nightmares and helping me carry the grief. Next Thursday, we'll continue our journey into Temujin's mind, follow Deborah's descent into darkness, and watch Johnny's violence unfold. If you enjoyed this installment, please share your favorite nightmare with a friend or family member. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to go deeper, have you ever wondered what your favorite story says about you? What draws you to the stories you return to over and over again? I offer story shadow readings, literary consultations that explore the psychology behind the stories that captivate us most. Whether it's crime noir, horror, or any other narrative that speaks to your shadow self, we can uncover what these stories reveal about your own psychological landscape. I also offer psychological tarot readings, creative consultations, and custom healing stories. Visit storyshadows.com to learn about how the darkness in fiction illuminates the complexity within us all. I'll see you next Thursday when we return to the danger and depravity of To Make the World Obey. And tune in every other Wednesday for a new standalone short story. Thank you for sharing this time with me. Good night.